In today's video, the latest and hopefully final installment in the saga of BYD Shark 6 plug-in hybrid ute drag race gate. Some new information has come to light about the mad physics of drag racing this vehicle. How does the electrical system and the combustion system work together in that sort of crunched delivery time frame of getting from 0 to 400 metres at maximum power, which is quite interesting and which is hard to derive any other way, frankly. I also want to give you more of a voice because that's kind of important. And I just want to do a quick check. We've got lights, camera, cicadas, speaking hexadecimal to each other from hell. Yes, they're going off. Slightly different mic setup though today. No pants, sunscreen liberally applied, obviously, because Australia and otherwise nasty burns. We appear to be set up. Let's go. I'm John Cadogan from AutoExpert.com.au. New cars cheap, but Australia only website. Code. Okay, so let's give you a voice first. I've got to cover off the cicadas because otherwise, you know, the comments will just be infested with them. Can you hear that? I've changed the mic setup. Hopefully they're not as bad as they have been previously, but no guarantees. They're all out there by the billion, speaking hexadecimal to each other, channeling the cries of the damned in hexadecimal from hell. Those bastards. Greg Parks 4787 has the following constructive criticism for me. Poor sound recording. Together with Curl Zero, Kurl0, who says, between the birds and the cicadas, no one outside of this country realises how hard it is to film in Australia. Agreed, dude, and like much of the so-called free Western world, if you go outside with a camera in your hand, you're likely to be surrounded by a dozen police officers with their guns drawn because you might be doing hostile reconnaissance, so there's that. Hashtag freedom. Neil Tomlinson, 1199, says, can't watch your video at John Cadogan at Auto Expert. It sounds like 300 rattlesnakes are sound bombing you. If only it was only some trivial number of rattlesnakes. You Americans, honestly, in America, you think you've got the market cornered on venomous critters with those pussies, the friggin' rattlesnake and the black widow spider. Come to Australia, where funnel web spiders rain from the skies randomly, a minimum of twice every day. It's in the Bureau's website. The Bureau of Meteorology predicts it faithfully. It's the only thing they ever get right. Now, if only it was 300 rattlesnakes, like that would be a triviality and easy to overcome. Try dealing with 1 billion flesh-eating cicadas just outside your window. Every day when I get up, there are 30 or 40 of the fuckers dead on the driveway. I have to pick them up and make sure that one of them's just not lying in wait, kind of thing. Now, Stizzy Grayson, 5541, says, John is sounding more and more irrelevant and out of touch, if that is possible. Thanks for that, Stizzy. But incorrect, dude, because I'm not sounding more irrelevant and out of touch. Not possible. I always strive for maximum irrelevance and out of touchedness, as you know. I'm actually sounding like I'm being sound bombed by 300 frickin' rattlesnakes. Try to keep up. And if only it was that. The 300 rattlesnakes would only be a warm-up, dude. Try to keep up. Sitting there in your mommy's basement with all your mates, i.e. alone. My strong advice for you, if you are shopping for Christmas for some salient dude in your life, is lay off the frickin' socks and the undies and the aftershave. We've all got enough of that. We could go without. Dudes love torches, and fortuitously, Olight has a Christmas sale, which wraps up on Tuesday at midnight, so let's not be equivocating for too long. Biggest problem, of course, with Olight is you go to their website, there's 5,000 torches. How do you choose one? Let me make it really simple for you. I carry my aging Warrior Mini 2, and it is awesome because you can use the little barrel switch here to give you a little bit of light work, and you can adjust the levels when, you know, you've got plenty of time to make shit happen. But if you really need light in a hurry, it's got a tail switch. Boom. And you can see that this has been biffed and dropped and scratched up against my Leatherman endlessly in my pocket. Still functional after a couple of years. It's been upgraded. This is the direct upgrade. This is the Warrior Mini 3. It's an awesome torch, same kind of thing, only better. It's got a better tail switch and a better barrel switch, and it's a bit brighter and, you know, just generally nicer. They don't get paid to make them worse, just like car companies when they release a new model. Got to make the new one better. If that's a bit big for the pocket because, you know, skinny jeans or something, then you might consider the Warrior Nano, which is everything the Mini is, only shorter. So that's pretty cool. If there's a likely zombie apocalypse, but, you know, things might change, then the Warrior 3S is like, honey, I just pumped the Mini. And it's got the same switch on the barrel, switch on the tail. It's just a bit bigger and beefier. It's at the absolute upper limit of pocket friendliness, so that's awesome. And of course, if a zombie apocalypse is certain, the recently upgraded Warrior X4 is just great. It's too big for the pocket, so you get this thermoplastic sort of case, which does a great job on retention, but it's easy to deploy. And there's also a hidden USB-C charging port just in there, which is kind of cool. It doesn't affect the waterproof nature of the port, open or closed. It's still waterproof to, I'm going to say, 2 meters and drop tested similarly. It's got a nice ring to hang on to with the finger, a stainless steel bezel, so if you need to breach a car window to rescue, I don't know, a kid or a pet trapped in the heat, or help someone in the aftermath of a car crash, you get through a window, no problem. The pro tip there is look for the 90-degree corner at the top of the window of tempered glass, because that's where the residual stresses are poorly resolved, and that's the easiest place to smash the window. So yeah, dude, this is great but bulky, I'd have to say. And if you're more of a, you know, vital sales representative or something, then you might consider the Arcfeld Ultra, which is made out of this spooky aluminium alloy that in many ways is kind of tougher than titanium. It is a torch, but it's also a laser pointer and a UV light. So UV light is really good if you want to, you know, play doctor in a hotel room or something, but it can also help you find scorpions. So if you're still looking for a Christmas present for, I don't know, ex-wife number 3, for example, then the scorpion detecting power of the Arcfeld Ultra is not to be underestimated. I'll put links to my preferred Olight torches in the description, and just remember the sale wraps up on Tuesday at midnight, so let's not be dilly-dallying, especially as all the good ones typically sell out pretty quickly during the sale. And now the serious part of the quote-unquote show, in which we address the mad physics of drag racing in the Shark 6. And this one is from Z0 Harm. I got this by email, okay? So that's got me torn, Z0 Harm. Does he mean zero harm? Or, which would be a benign sort of persona, wouldn't it? Or Z0 emphasis on harm, like maximum carnage. Z0 says, just wanted to point you to the specifications from the attached handbook for internal combustion plus the front plus rear electric motors, page 229. And then he lists all of those. There's the outputs for the combustion engine and the outputs for the front and rear electric modules in terms of their rated power, which I'm assuming means continuously rated, and also their peak, which means, you know, available for B's dick of time. Z0 goes on and says, it is curious, BYD claim the maximum kilowatts and newton meters based on the 2 electric motors, front and rear, even though the ICE can also, in HEV mode, drive front wheels in parallel with front electric motor, whilst rear electric motor drives rear wheels. Yeah, that would be how it works. The front one drives the front and the rear one drives the rear. See working modes from page 26 for all the various HEV combinations possible. He attached the owner's manual so I could cure my insomnia by reading the Chinese English on how that works. Should be an capable vehicle. Have you ordered one? No, I haven't. But this is kind of interesting, right? Because instead of just having one rating for the electrical system of this much power and this much torque, there are two ratings, right? There's a continuous one, like available all the time, more or less, and then there's a peak, which is available for a very short window of time, apparently. And then I got another one here from dude named Al from Zap Solar in Queensland, who says, "Oh, John, some additional info regarding this directly from a Chinese engineer at the launch event." The cool thing about engineering, actually, most science is like this. The cool thing about it is it doesn't matter where you're from. Newton applies in every language exactly the same. So that's always gratifying. You know, you can have any sort of language barrier you want. I've had this in China and South Korea and Japan, right? There can be very limited bilingual whatever between engineer 1 and engineer 2, or engineer 1 and engineer 2, but as soon as you start talking about kilowatts and, you know, the time rate of change of this and that, they're all going because it's the same language, right? That's the beautiful thing about physics, really, as I see it. So Al goes on and says, the combined front and rear motors are rated much lower than 321 kilowatts, but they can deliver peak power of 321 kilowatts, 650 newton meters for a short time. This is kind of interesting and pivotal, okay? If you do an acceleration run from standstill, it will power the full 321 kilowatts in full EV mode until the speed is high enough for the engine to assist. So that's fascinating, right? You can overcrank the electrical system, or it will overcrank itself from, say, 0 to 70 to deliver 320 kilowatts briefly, 321, whatever. Who's going to argue about 1 kilowatt in the context of 320? It's less than 1/3%, for God's sake. So the electrical system overcranks itself. The battery delivers aggressively quickly, hard, whatever, a lot of electricity briefly in the absence of the combustion engine powering the wheels, because it can't do that at low speed. It can only do that above 60 to 70. So the electrical system steps up and overcranks itself briefly in that drag racing situation. And if you wonder why we're talking about that, if you haven't seen the other videos, Car Expert, Paul Marrick over at Car Expert, did a really interesting homoerotic wave, like every time, dude, 500,000 subscribers. Why didn't I think of that? You know? Anyway, he did a really interesting drag race between the Shark 6 and his Raptor, and the Shark 6 shat all over the Raptor, 0 to 400 metres, 3 times back to back, although the window of victory shrunk iteratively, 1, 2 and 3. The Raptor was much closer for the third drag race. Okay, so that tells you something about the electrical endurance of doing this, but it's a pretty unrealistic test. Like, who's going to do 3 drag races back to back? Like, it's just not going to happen, right? Anyway, Al goes on and says, it means that in full EV mode, you cannot get the acceleration of a 320 kilowatt EV, since the motor runs into thermal peaks very quickly and the engine will kick in automatically based on throttle load. That's kind of interesting too, but how long do you need 321 kilowatts for? That's the key question, right? Al goes on, he says, he did not want to say how long they can sustain 321 kilowatts, but I assume it is much less than 30 seconds, since he had a chuckle when I mentioned that, and he suggested less. Yeah, it would be much less, because 321 kilowatts for 30 seconds would have you not quite breaking the sound barrier, but you'd be going faster than that vehicle goes. Like, come on. Al says, I've ordered one, but given the information in your video and what I gathered from Mr. BYD, I have a feeling sustained off-roading on very steep terrain could be an issue. Sustained high temperature, current torque load on the electrical system. Best regards, Al. Okay, that's really interesting. So what happens here? Obviously, they're talking about duty cycle, and duty cycle is a common sort of thing for lots of electrical devices. I grapple with this with my welders, for example. If I've got a lot of welding to do, obviously you might jig something up and then you tack it all in place and then you weld it out, right? And during the welding out process, you're running a lot of beads back to back because you've got the thing already tacked up. You just want to get it joined together and then get out of your Darth Vader suit as quickly as possible in the middle of summer, obviously. And the welder might not be able to keep up, especially if you're cranking it pretty hard. Like a 200 amp welder running at 200 amps. In industry, that kind of welder will do that all day long, but the kind of welder that you or I might buy for our various fat caves, not so much. So you might have a 20% duty cycle at its maximum output, meaning that in a 10-minute window, you could probably only weld for 2 minutes, kind of thing, at maximum. But if you're down at, I don't know, 100 amps or something, welding sheet metal, then maybe you could go for a lot longer, maybe continuously at that sort of thing. So this is usually, with welders and most other electrical equipment, it's related to heat. With the BYD, it could be related to the endurance, the heat endurance of the high voltage cables, and it might also be related to the waste heat in the battery. I'm not sure what the limitation is, and they probably wouldn't tell you. They definitely know, right? This is one of the reasons high-powered EVs are all going to an 800-volt system, because for any amount of power at the device, it means only half the current has to flow through the wires at 800 volts. 400 volts, twice the current, because voltage times current equals power, kind of thing, okay? So when you think about this, I had a look at the homoerotic wave drag race, and which is kind of appropriate term when you think about it. Anyway, maximum acceleration from 0 to 60 or 70, how long is that actually going to take? So in that drag race from Car Expert, it was 5.7 seconds to 100 k's an hour. And given the way acceleration works, like you've got this device that pumps kilowatts into a thing with mass, so it starts to accelerate. Kilowatts applied to mass means acceleration. Acquisition of energy, right? And the relationship between energy and speed is that energy is proportional to the square of speed, right? So if you think about it in pure Newtonian physics context, if you want to take a block of something from 0 on the bench here to 100 k's an hour, to get to 50, it only takes a quarter of the time, right? And the other 3/4 of the time are 50 to 100. That's why it takes so long to get to Vmax in a car, because every packet of energy you apply after that has to grapple with the square of speed kind of thing. So it's always quicker to go from 0 to 50 than it is to go from 50 to 100, is what I'm saying. And that would mean that if you take all the other factors out of play, like the delta T at the start and aerodynamic drag and things of that nature, then it's kind of 6 seconds to 100 means about 1.5 seconds to 50 and about 4.5 seconds for 50 to 100. That's how this works, right? 3/4 of the time for the second half of the incremental increase in speed, the delta V, all right? So in this context, it probably means that it's going to take 2 or 3 seconds for the Shark 6 to get to that 60 to 70 kilometre an hour window when the internal combustion engine can start to apply itself directly to the powertrain. And the way that happens is it goes into parallel hybrid mode, where you've got the electrical system working in parallel with the combustion engine driving the wheels. There's a single speed transaxle kind of arrangement for the combustion engine. That means the combustion engine clutch engages and it's driving 1-to-1 the front transaxle, and it's delivering its 135 kilowatts at that point, right? So that means that the vehicle only has to overcrank its electrical system in that really significant way for about 3 seconds. And then you're in a position where the combustion engine can take over 135 kilowatts of that overcranking, and the electrical system can go back to doing what it's rated to do more or less continuously. And let's face it, it's only going to be doing that for another few seconds until you get to Vmax, right? and then you lose your license. So it's all kind of irrelevant for real world driving. It's irrelevant for real world towing and all of that stuff. But it's interesting to know how the technology applies itself in extremis. And that means that you've always got those 321 kilowatts notionally available. And the electrical system is going to pick up the slack if you are in that window of speed below about 70 k's an hour. And then when you get above it, the combustion engine's going to join the party directly by clutching itself together with the front transaxle, and the electrical system's going to let go. And it'd be interesting to see how the endurance of the Shark 6, like how the longevity of the battery pack plays out for people who drive like cut snakes, because driving batteries aggressively like that is not good for them. Dealing with the waste heat is extremely difficult, you know, because if you're making 320 kilowatts, I can't imagine that doing that is particularly efficient. So if you're generating 10% waste heat, that's like having a 30 kilowatt heater under your ass, okay? And that 30 kilowatts has to be removed by some kind of heat pump or heat exchanger. It might just be a heat exchanger like a quote unquote radiator in a car, which is actually just a convective cooler, or it might be actually a heat pump like a refrigeration system, which has a coefficient of performance going for it, you know, but greater complexity and also greater potential repair costs down the track. So there's that. But 30 kilowatts, you know, like if you plug an electric heater into a GPO in Australia, like a PowerPoint in your house, then it's rated for 2.3 kilowatts, not freaking 30. And that gives you some sort of ballpark, let's say 2.5 kilowatts. So 2 electric heaters maxed out is going to be 5. So we're talking about 12 power points on full heat is that battery discharging at 321 kilowatts. So that's a technical challenge, and also the cables, right? Because the cables would start to heat up, and we don't want to be melting the insulation on a cable that is running 400 volts and delivering 150 kilowatts that way and 150 kilowatts that way kind of thing, do we? That could end badly. I think you'd agree. Now, I got this one too. This is a bit long, but it shows the challenge that buyers face. Okay, if you're buying a Shark 6, you're probably really interested in a Shark 6, okay, and you want to know more and more about it. You've got one on order. It's the prick tease from hell. You're waiting, you're in the foreplay, you're waiting for the sex, metaphorically. So you want to know as much as you possibly can about it. So what do? You go to the website and you see what information is there, and the website's not really helping you at this point because the website is designed to get people to place an order. It's not designed to help you if you've placed an order and you want to know more about the vehicle. It's actually pretty shallow, right? So you go and darken the door of your dealership and kind of here's what happens. This is a dude named BlueStacks 1862. He goes, John, I believe your power and torque numbers are a bit off here. They were, and I'll get to that too. I did make a mistake in the last video. I'm going to man up about that right now and tell you exactly how that happened, and part of the reason for doing this is to correct that mistake. Trust me on this. But other than that, nail on the head. Yeah, aside from everything I fucked up, nail on the head. And I'm not entirely clear on how the engine will drive the wheels at the same time as both or one of the electric motors. Yeah, the front electric motor and the combustion engine can both drive the front transaxle together. That's allowed. They have a system in place for that. There's no problem with that. I'm thinking there is a chance, say cruising at 100 k's an hour, the electric motors may mostly or completely shut off and just be pure front wheel drive ice, at least until you need to pass a truck, etc. No, I think it's predominantly electric. The system is based on driving mostly in electric mode, and it would revert to series hybrid mode where you've got electric motor being driven by the battery and being topped up by the generator being powered by the combustion engine. So combustion engine drives the generator, tops up the battery, which drives the electrical system of the car. Parallel hybrid only happens at highway sort of cruising speeds above 70, 60, 70 k's an hour, and only when that amount of power is required. Okay? At other times, when the combustion engine runs, it drives the generator and tops up the battery, which drives the electrical system. That's how this works. Okay, so whatever the case, I'm buying one. Okay, thank you very much, BlueStacks, for being a lab rat in the mad experiment for the rest of us who can restrain ourselves and just see how you lab rats go with your ownership experience. I think that's very generous of you to do that. Love your work. No need to suck, dude. Interestingly, I've been in talks with my local BYD dealer in Sheepshagistan, and the sales rep keeps insisting the engine doesn't ever drive the wheels and is only a generator. Gave up trying to convince him there is a clutch that engages at higher speeds. Lol. Yeah, well, I wouldn't go looking for technical advice from a car salesman because that's not their job. The car salesman's job is to extract your money in the most efficient way possible by coercing you into thinking that you can't live without it, dude. So if you want technical advice, don't go to a car salesman. That's just, you know, it doesn't matter if it's BYD, it's across the whole industry. They're just not good at that. Car salesmen are usually not even car enthusiasts. They don't get that stuff. They just know how to extract your money. They're very good at it. They're ambush predators. They're like a crocodile, only not as nice. Front motor, 170 kilowatts, 310 newton meters. Rear motor, 150, 340. Total electric all-wheel drive output, 320 and 650. Yeah, I did fuck that up yesterday, or the other day, whenever it was. I'm sorry about that. The ICE adds 135 kilowatts and 260 newton meters. Yep, it does. However, notice advertised max total power figures are just the same as total electric output. The BYD does not appear to add the ICE power to this. That's because overcranking the electrical system compensates for the inability of the ICE engine to contribute below 70 k's an hour, as previously discussed. So it seems anomalous when you just look at the numbers, but you have to understand the operational context of this kind of thing, I would argue. Or infer from this, the ICE may not drive at the same time as electric motors. Yes, it may not. It would not below 70 k's an hour, and it may not above that if additional power is not required. Series hybrid mode would be the default, and then parallel if you need more power right now above 70 is kind of how this works. Or perhaps it's just how they advertise it. Yeah, I think that is key, right? You want to get people across the line. BYD's website is designed to get people across the line. It's got nice images of glamorous technology and not very much explanation, frankly, about how this shit actually works. And not singling them out either, because most car companies are like this. They don't want to bog you down in the details because they want you to go to your dealership and open your frickin' wallet. That's the car business. Okay, so where are we? Or perhaps it's just how they advertise it. Maybe they only measure the power at lower speeds when the ICE wasn't engaged. The point is the electrical system doesn't make 320 when the ICE engine is contributing, right? The total system power is 320. And how you get there, that's just a computer decides based on parameters programmed into it, right? That's really how this works. If everything did work together, you could actually get a whopping 455 kilowatts and 910 newton meters. And wouldn't the kiddies love that? Above 70 kilometers an hour at least. I'm just waiting, right, for some ambitious aftermarket programmer to do a tune for the Shark 6, the 455 kilowatt tune with 910 newton meters. Wouldn't that be interesting? I wouldn't be doing it too far away from the nearest fire station. I tried to clarify this with the sales rep. Fail. but he had even less of an idea on how the car operates than me. It seems to me, BlueStacks, that you have a pretty decent idea about how that vehicle operates, and I hope your lab rat experimentation is entirely pleasant. I hope it works out well for you. I really do. Now, talking about my mistake, the glitch I made. I got one comment here from a dude whose name was just a bunch of presumably Chinese characters who said, somewhat harshly, "You lie shamelessly. 650 newton meters of torque from both front and rear motors. Pathetic." Don't hold back, unpronounceable. What do you really think? Another one here from Haidachima 363 in a similar but more diplomatic vein. "Oh, John, Shark 6 has 650 newton meters of torque, not what you quoted. 310 newton meters on the front motor and 340 on the rear motor. With total combined output of 650. This is more than any ute on the market." Yes, it is. Thank you very much for pointing that out. I did make an error. The way I made this error was I actually went to redbook.com.au to get the performance figures, like the engine output figures. I get most of my specifications for most vehicles from redbook.com.au, which is particularly reliable, but not 100%. In this case, I'll put their entrant up there. If you go to redbook.com.au, you look at specifications and then you click on the electrical tab, it will say alternative engine torque 310 newton meters. So what they've done is they've harvested the data from somewhere, I don't know where, but they haven't added the rear torque as well, which is 340 for a total of 650. And I just went and copied that, and that was my bad, because I should have picked up that did seem woefully inadequate. So I fall on my sword and I tell you up front that I am guilty as charged. I was 100% wrong with that. This is hopefully an attempt to set that particular record straight. I don't think I'm a liar, though, as alleged by Unpronounceable, because you have to intend to misrepresent the truth or what you believe the truth to be. There has to be like a mens rea dimension to guilty mind, dimension to lying. Like if you make a mistake, that's not a lie, it's a mistake. So just for disambiguation. Right now, Tallboy 49, in the spirit of international cooperation, says, "As good as it may be, I will never buy a Chinese-made vehicle. I would rather walk." Let's put that to the test, shall we, dickhead? And some of you are saying you'll be walking because there'll be nothing else to drive. Well, so be it. That ship has sailed, Tallboy 49. Like, there is so much Chinese manufactured stuff in the world. If I took out everything that was made in China out of my fat cave, there'd be a lot of empty space. You know, many of my machine tools, welders, whatever, made in China. Much of the camera gear made in China. So much stuff made in China. 75% of the world's lithium-ion batteries are made in frickin' China. And there's nothing wrong with that. This incredibly reliable Olight is made in frickin' China, and I don't worry about it letting me down. It's been totally reliable for 2.5 years, and I would have to say that my impression of Chinese manufacturing is that the Chinese can make stuff up here from a quality level, they can make stuff down here from a quality level. The problem with making stuff up here at a quality level, and it doesn't matter what the stuff is, it can be machine tools or welders or cars or cameras. If you make it up here, it's expensive because you have to use trained people, like highly trained people, and really good equipment to achieve that. You have to have quality control systems in place to weed out the shit so that when someone opens the box, they're not disappointed 2 times out of 3. But much of the world, like in America, they've got Harbour Freight, right? Now, Harbour Freight is a specialist at selling this, right? You can get cheap tools from Harbour Freight, and cheap tools are cheap in both senses of the word. They don't cost you much, and They're generally not very good. You spend half your life fixing the fuckers, okay? So Chinese manufacturing spans this and this, but in the West, we often want this. What we actually want is we want this, but we want it at this price down here. And that's freaking impossible, right? So another example I can give you of the proliferation of Chinese manufacturing is the Ford Ranger, okay? You know the latest model Ranger, you know they prick-teased it and they prick-teased it and they prick-teased it and they promised it and then the date went over the horizon and then we went over the horizon on the calendar and then the date went back over the horizon again about 4 or 5 times. And the reason for that was because some number of parts, I'm gonna say 390, but please don't quote me on that because I might be wrong, but some number of parts from China could not be sourced after the pandemic, okay? So we were essentially, Ford was waiting in Thailand for 390 parts for each Ranger from China. And this is the other hilarious thing about people saying, oh, we'll only ever buy a Japanese car. I'll only ever own a Hilux. I'll only ever own, you know, an Isuzu D-Max, whatever. They're all made in frickin' Thailand. They've never actually seen the sun set in the land of the rising sun. So the Chinese are coming, and they're coming for the car industry in a big way. It is inevitable, and I've seen this attitude in the 70s from people who used to call Toyotas Jap crap. You know, we used to do that as kids when the world was different. And then in the 90s when Hyundai lobbed and Kia was even lower quality than Hyundai kind of thing. And in the space of, I don't know, I'm going to say 15 years or something, they've become, the Hyundai Kia has become, you know, right up there with the Japanese in terms of quality and desirability. They're really good cars now. China's going to do exactly that, only instead of it taking 25 years in the case of the Japanese and 15 years in the case of the South Koreans, they're going to do it in about a decade. And in many ways, the BYD Shark 6 is an example. Even irrespective of how well it might be executed or not, right? It's an example of how the Chinese car industry is going to upend the establishment, because that Shark 6, just look at it on paper, it upends everything. It's 60 grand, it's faster than a $90,000 Raptor, and it measures up in most respects on paper, okay? Even if it's crap in its execution, and there's no suggestion that it is, it might be crap. Jury's out. Lab rats are queued up to run the final beta testing experiment, which I'll watch enthusiastically. But dude, the Chinese are coming, and the Japanese and the South Koreans, the Germans, they're terrified, right? Because they want to sprint forward, but they're too busy looking over their shoulder at the Chinese, planning their overtaking manoeuvre. Now, Chris M 4096 says, car expert reviews are great. Well, they're okay. At least they drive the vehicles before they sprout strong opinions. I think he's attempting to knee me in the nuts, sort of covertly, by saying that. Well, let me tell you, Chris, a couple of things on that. You don't learn all that much by driving the fucking vehicle. The car industry loves to get tame journalists together at the one launch location. They even lay on a video cameraman, and the various journalists queue up to do their piece to camera, and they just regurgitate the shit they were told at the press conference. And that's why all the reviews sound the fucking same. There's a few dudes doing it a little bit differently. Paul from Car Expert does a pretty good job, I'd have to say. And so does Matt Brand from Car Source. He's doing it a little bit differently, right? He's got this I'm on speed kind of persona of stark over enthusiasm. You know, he's like yes about anything. The new Suzuki Baleno, it's awesome kind of thing. But at least he does his thing a bit differently. They don't all pretend to be, the rest of them are all pretending to do Top Gear badly, right? They're all doing like Top Gear with no talent mostly. But anyway, you know, for most people buying cars today, let's say you're in the market for a car in a popular segment, like a medium SUV, right? you don't care how it drives. You don't. It just has to be okay. This is the reality. How it actually drives, it just has to be okay. If it's shit, that's a problem. But if we're going to split hairs about does the Sportage handle better than the CX-5 and which one has a few more kilowatts, nobody really gives a fuck about that. Nobody who actually buys cars gives a fuck about that. Just has to, drive okay. Putting the family in it, going on holidays, going to the shops, taking the kids to school, just has to drive okay. That's how car buyers are. And the other thing is, in the modern world, there aren't too many cars that drive shit. There just aren't. Most of them are pretty good, dude. So driving a car, here's the reality for me. Driving a car takes a day and a half out of my life just picking up a car and dropping it back. And then I have to go on location and film a review. Then I have to cut all of that together. And most of what I derive from that process is irrelevant to the person buying the car because they want to know if it's a good choice, right? And a good choice or not is generally down to its fundamental specifications and how good or how shit the car company is at looking after you if something goes wrong. That's how it is, okay? So if you're a car enthusiast and you want to watch car review porn, different proposition. But I've spent so much of my life testing cars, driving new cars, the novelty of doing that has actually worn off a lot. And I know that the actual benefit of doing it is very limited, except in cases where you're reviewing a performance car or a hardcore off-roader. If you really wanted to choose the best hardcore off-roader, you want to get them all together in a hardcore off-roading setting and then all throw them at the Widowmaker and throw them at some deep ditch full of water and see which ones have got strengths and weaknesses there. Same thing with a performance car. You'd want to take it to a track and thrash its tits off, and that would be important to the buyer. But for everyone else, is just buying cars to get the family around and go on holidays occasionally, not so important. So one of the reasons I can pump out more content is I don't detain myself sucking the car industry's dick metaphorically in this way, okay? So if you don't like that, there's plenty of car review porn out there, so just go for that, dude. I'm not here to appeal to you or beg you to read anything on my website or watch my videos. I don't give a shit if you watch or not. If you find it interesting, that's fantastic. If you'd rather watch something else, then what are we still doing here? Kind of thing. And Scatman Ost for Australia says, speaking of facts, John, some diesels do have throttles. Inconvenient. Hey, stroking my beard. Yes, now don't get me wrong, I did say beard. That's right, I did say in a previous video that diesels don't have throttles. And they don't. At least they don't have throttles in the context of a petrol car, gasoline car, if you're in America, right? The throttle in a gasoline car is there, it's essential. It won't work without the throttle. It's an essential part of the flow dynamics and making that engine function in a petrol car, okay? The throttle in a diesel engine is like an accessory, okay? Like diesels on fundamentals, they run wide open. Okay, wide open throttle is kind of how they run. And what you do to change the power output of a petrol engine, you change the amount of air flowing into it, obviously, and you do that with the throttle, okay? With a diesel engine, you just change the amount of fuel going in, and that changes the power output, okay? So it's fundamentally different combustion flow dynamic proposition. Some diesels do have a butterfly that functions like a throttle, but it really only has a couple of purposes, one of which is to stop the engine doing a St. Vitus dance when you shut it down. So when you shut a modern diesel down, the butterfly slams shut, and that reduces the auto ignition kind of carry-on during the shutdown phase. And that's one of the reasons why diesels are more refined now. They're better at things like that. Direct injection also takes out that sound of ball bearings in the crankcase kind of sound that you used to get on Grandad's massive Ferguson tractor sort of thing. but that's separate to the throttle issue, right? Diesels are just more refined now. The other thing the quote-unquote throttle does in a modern diesel is it's there to help with the EGR, because if you're running a diesel without a quote-unquote throttle, it's difficult to force the exhaust gas to flow into the manifold, right, into the inlet of the engine. And you need it to do that for a couple of reasons. You need it to do that for emissions, and you also need it to do it for volumetric efficiency at low loads. So if you put a throttle in there, that's a way of creating more of a vacuum after the butterfly, which promotes flow of exhaust gas into the port, right? So a throttle in a diesel, when they are present, they're not there for the same reasons that they're there in a petrol engine. Petrol engine won't work without one. Diesel engine absolutely will, but the EGR won't work properly without it, and it won't shut down very well when you turn the ignition off. So there's that. And finally, I just wanted to run this one by you because it's related to the BYD Shark. Press release lobbed just the other day. It said News Corp Australia, so that would be Rupert and his cohorts, names BYD Shark as Car of the Year. Imagine that. That's really interesting to me. We'll get to that. But here's what they say first. They say the Shark is the first ute and the first vehicle offered by a Chinese brand to win the award. BYD's plug-in hybrid powered Shark represents an affordable, clever and powerful choice for Aussie motorists. They're starting to sound like the brochure and not like journalists, aren't they? Imagine that. David McCowan, motoring content director, so not editor or executive producer, motoring content director. I hope he's got a hat with that on it, like a cap with MCD on top. The News Corp Australia said that the Shark represents a worthy winner. Well, I should hope so. You wouldn't give it to an unworthy winner, would you? Quote, this ute delivers double the power of established rivals while packing more features for less money. Imagine that. Smoother, smarter and quieter than diesel-powered utes, the BYD Shark 6 is more than a fresh option for consumers. It's a wake-up call for the industry. News Corp Australia motoring journalist Danielle Collis said the BYD was, quote, a true standout. Imagine that. She continued, quote, consumers are often quick to assume that a lower-priced or Chinese vehicle means compromising on quality, but that's not the case with the Shark. Imagine that. Imagine being able to make all these determinations of a vehicle that you can't buy here today, that isn't going to be delivered until next year. How can it be a car of the year without actually being on sale? How is there any guarantee that the vehicle you've tested, if there was actually any testing taking place here, how can you guarantee that it wasn't just some pre-production vehicle, right? How can you make some assessment of what it's going to be like on things like quality, right? Quality is more than, has it got new car smell and do the bits all fit together properly? Quality is like also related to long-term performance and engineering, R&D, robustness and reliability and things of that nature, is it not? So I just find it totally curious that a journalistic output in Australia can give a 2024 Car of the Year award to a vehicle that will not be delivered to a single fucking customer in 2024. To me, that is flat out amazing.